a couple people at NASA were learning about crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing was pretty early at that time in the world. Like it was like there had been various things over time. There were some selfish reasons, and he was trying to leverage these things he's learned about for his own organization, but he also was trying to benefit all of NASA, which pilots were very successful. And our NASA community really appreciates, and I just think the engineers on here as well, appreciates the very technical problems. People come to NASA to try to solve the technical problems. They want their Apollo 13 moment. But when we run campaigns or challenges, etc., it's just a different means to solve their normal work.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Innovation Podcast, Cappuccino Podcast. I'm having my podcast next to me, as always. And as we saw in the last episode, in the last podcast, it was actually with Mahdi Alawi, one of the most remarkable leaders in Africa, who successfully boasted and still do the open innovation mindset in Africa with multiple initiatives. And I've been asked since this podcast and been contacted with many innovation leaders, whether from the newsletter, the monthly strategy newsletter I'm sending, or the ExecINNOV club I founded, to figure out how to integrate this open innovation mindset in their innovation framework. And I'm happy to see that I have supported one of them last May, and now I've been contacted just a few weeks to get a very good news that it's working, and that's what we want. Open innovation is something that brings a lot of value. And speaking of open innovation, what is actually surprising is that the last episode wasn't actually the first episode we mentioned open innovation. It was actually in the first ever episode I've hosted with two technology innovation leaders within NASA, George Salazar, one of the engineering gurus within NASA. He's retired now, and Stewart within the Center of Excellence for Collaborative Innovation. And speaking of this center, I'm welcoming with us today Ryon Steward. Ryon, welcome to this podcast.
Thank you.
So if I do have a good memory, you're based in Houston, right?
Yes. Steve and I both are in the general Houston area, and both help manage the Center of Excellence for Collaborative Innovation for NASA.
All right. And how is the weather there? Because here it's so volatile.
It has been unusually even more warm than normal. Fall time is my favorite in Houston because it's like everybody else's summer. Like I can still wear shorts and sandals, but it's actually been pretty hot. Kind of like today, I think it's nearly, I'm going to say in Fahrenheit, so it's only so helpful, but I think it's nearly 90, it's supposed to be nearly 90 degrees Fahrenheit today, which is pretty hot for late October.
Yes.
I look forward to a little bit cooling down, hopefully coming soon.
Yeah, I mean, this is Texas though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't move here because of cold weather.
Yeah, sure. So let's start before getting into the topic. Let's introduce you to everyone. I think the best one to introduce you is yourself. Can you tell us a bit about your activities within NASA and also your background before getting?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I am a graduate of the University of Washington Aeronautics and Astronautics Engineering Program, so aerospace engineer. And so I came to NASA after interning at NASA and Lockheed Martin previous to that as a flight controller and instructor for the International Space Station. So I was working in mission control, flying the International Space Station, training people to do that, training instructors to teach, training astronauts about the motion control system. And so I did that for quite a while. Had a lot of fun, and it was a really good foundational experience. And then I made a lateral move to work in COSI, where I'm at now, the Center of Excellence for Collaborative Innovation. And we help NASA and the rest of the federal U.S. government get solutions to problems using crowdsourcing and open innovation. And so we try to bring, like you said, an innovative mindset to people, but in a different frame. And I think we'll talk about that as we go today. It's not necessarily about the individual as the innovator, but the individual recognizing that they can use help from others to, give themselves a better starting point, so that they can, take something maybe they didn't have previously and integrate that into their whatever they're doing and then move forward. And so I've done that now for 6 years. As of this week, it's actually my 6-year anniversary in COSI. And then I now am the deputy program manager of that team. I think I've been the deputy program manager for almost 3 years. So Steve Rader, as you said, he was on your first podcast. Him and I help work together and manage this team.
Yes, perfect. And congratulations for this background. And you mentioned crowdsourcing, and this is going to be our topic today. Knowing that with Steve, we had a conversation in depth about crowdsourcing, about open innovation, crowdfunding, and everything related to crowd.
Yes.
But this time, it's going to be a bit different. We're going to talk about internal crowdsourcing. Can you tell us a bit about it, and what is the difference between the standard crowdsourcing and this one?
Yeah, and so the concept at the highest level is really the same still. It's that you as an individual or you as a team or whatever it is that, however you're working on something, you very likely, most of the time, do not have the best answers as to solve your problems. And so whatever it is you're trying to do, you can very likely use help from somebody else to get you further ahead than you would have been otherwise. So you can go to the public, you can go outside of your organization to get good ideas, and that's really good for breakthrough solutions. You can do a very similar thing by going to your organization first, your broad organization, especially if you have a larger organization. So I don't know the exact number of NASA civil servant and contractors, but let's say it's 60,000 or so. There's plenty enough people, enough centers across the United States where there are plenty of silos. You hear that all the time for organizations. We're stuck in our silos. They don't talk to each other. They don't know how to talk to each other. That's what crowdsourcing is really good at, is breaking through those silos. So as an internal organization, if you have a means to connect those people, then you can ensure that you're not going to pay for something twice. If somebody, in a different state or a different region, a different directorate, whatever, however you're organized, has some good solutions, maybe even it's just a partial solution or a good connection, then you want to take advantage of that before you go buy something outside, right? And so a lot of times we'll use our internal crowdsourcing platform, NASA Spark, before we'll go public. And many times because of it, we don't have to. Like, we can bring a question, or we can ask for help, or whatever it is that we need to do, and we'll get there later, I'm sure. We can do that internally. We can ask our internal crowd and say, hey, what do you know about this thing? And you can start a good discussion. Almost always people find out that when you have a large enough organization, you may think you're the expert on a thing, but there's probably 5 more of you in your organization. And it takes the right framing of a problem to a broad audience like that to find those people often.
All right, very interested. And I'm a bit curious because when I had Steve and George in the first episode, we talked about also the open innovation and crowdsourcing and why they use it. And actually, I have understood that you guys, as we all know, you invent a lot and you have a lot of inventions. That's first reason. Mm-hmm. And secondly, I don't want to reinvent the wheel if it exists elsewhere with some young innovators, or maybe with co-creations with big companies. Depends on the format of we're choosing an open innovation. So my question is, what motivated NASA to think or to embrace crowdsourcing internally first?
Yeah, sure. So around 2009, that time frame, a couple people at NASA were learning about crowdsourcing, and crowdsourcing was pretty early at that time in the world. There had been various things over time, but becoming more formal as a means to really do R&D was relatively early. And so Jeff Davis was he was a director at Johnson Space Center. He was taking some classes at Harvard Business School, and I met Kareem Lakhani, who, if you've been following crowdsourcing, you know the name. He does a lot of work and a lot of research and papers in crowdsourcing. And so he was learning the power of crowdsourcing. And so Jeff Davis's organization had a pretty drastic funding cut, and so he was trying to figure out how can I, continue to get the good work done that I need to do with my organization on a reduced budget. How do I be more open in my R&D work? And so that, among other things, we had others at NASA who were also kind of piloting efforts. Mm-hmm. And one of the pilots that they started was the internal crowd. And so they were doing some external things with Top Coder. They were doing some external work with Incentive. And then we had an early pilot with Incentive called Incentive at Work, where it was our internal crowd to try to do the things I mentioned earlier. How do we leverage our own employees to break through silos, make connections so that we can save time and money for the agency. And so for Jeff, for sure, there were some selfish reasons, and he was trying to leverage these things he's learned about for his own organization, but he also was trying to benefit all of NASA, which the pilots were very successful. Eventually, the White House asked NASA to set up our Center of Excellence to support the whole government. That's why we're still here today. And it continues to be successful for NASA and the rest of the government.
Yeah, sure. Very interesting. And I'm seeing on the Q&A section, we wanted to say this for later, but it's aligned with my questions. We have a lot of engineers in the call, and they believe in concrete things. So this is going to be smooth transitions to my question. If you can share with us any example that you have in mind of where actually internal crowdsourcing led to a breakthrough idea within NASA.
Yeah, sure. So we have lots of examples. And in fact, if anyone were to Google COECI, COECI, or search it however you want to search it, I promise you'll find more than enough times of me or Steve Rader or others talking about all of our examples. Also, our public-facing website on nasa.gov/COECI has lots of examples of current projects and past ones. But sticking to the internal crowdsourcing that we're talking about, not that long ago, one that I don't think we've talked about a lot on other podcasts or other presentations was a campaign that an organization from our chief health medical officer, they were looking for a method to measure dynamic gas in an enclosed environment. And so when you think of an astronaut's helmet, it's an enclosed environment, and the partial pressures and how much of each gas is in there changes a lot, because with every inspiration, they're breathing in and they're breathing out. And so they needed an effective way to measure this. And they had found that there was some research that NASA had done, I think back in the Apollo era, quite a while ago. And in order to satisfy some of the NASA requirements for the next Artemis mission they were working on, they wanted to know what everybody else knew and who else was working on this. Do you have any good ideas, etc. And so we ran a campaign, very straightforward. I think it was open for 4 or 5 weeks or so, really just asking the question that I said, like, who knows about this stuff? They kind of listed some technical requirements, etc. And we had a webinar. We do this frequently with our internal crowds, where the problem owner will kind of discuss what we do, discuss what they're looking for, and we'll have a Q&A with the audience to listen. So they connected with over 300 NASA employees in this webinar, and ultimately got 2 submissions that advanced their technology pretty significantly. And ultimately what they really liked were the connections they made with people who already had some existing thoughts or solutions for the problem. And so they had estimated that it was going to take about a year and $500,000 worth of development time and cost to work on this. And they estimated that this one campaign, which was only probably 10 hours or less of work for them, and it's supposed to span maybe 5 weeks, they think it cut that in half. So they estimated they saved 6 months and $250,000 by doing this internal campaign. That was just one. And that's just one example. We have these all over the time. And so it's really neat. And our NASA community really appreciates, and I just think the engineers on here as well, appreciates the very technical problems. People come to NASA to try to solve the technical problems. They want their Apollo 13 moment. And so we always have a lot of fun when we can bring these engineering problems to our crowd, because they like to help with them, especially when they already might have a solution.
That's very interesting what you just mentioned, because actually in the club I founded on with ExecINNOV club with more than 13 innovation cross-industry innovation leaders who've been brainstorming about what are the common challenges within the companies, and they've been all agreed on reducing time to market, or optimizing the innovation portfolio, KPIs. This is the biggest elements. And
Yes.
in your example, I see that this is something we should benefit on and see how we can integrate it in all the innovation frameworks and see how
Mhm.
we can actually optimize the human resource
Yes.
first. And this
Oh
is
yeah.
very brilliant.
Yeah.
Um,
Steve gets on me a fair amount for not describing appropriately. He does describing what I mean when I say
yeah,
a better starting point. But that's often what we're doing here is we're saying, hey, this is the group at NASA tasked to work this problem. They have a set of requirements. Artemis mission needs something. These people are supposed to come up with it. And they can go in their, cubicles or their office and work on it. They're probably some of the smartest people in the world at this stuff. But still, they don't know everything, and technology is changing so rapidly that it's impossible to keep up with it all. And so they should leverage the knowledge of the agency. Who else knows this stuff? Who else knows parts of what we're talking about? Maybe you've worked on it. Maybe you know the old Apollo. Maybe you are the old Apollo person working, right? And so they didn't ask for someone to take their job, but they asked for somebody to say, hey, give me a better starting point because we need to help solve these requirements. And so they connected with two people who had some advanced ideas compared to what they had, and they can integrate those in, work together, do whatever they need to do. But they went from, here to over here, and now they're that much closer, and they saved a bunch of time and money. Yeah, it's all about those connections.
yeah, very interesting. And I mentioned the engineers are watching, but also many cross-industry leaders watching from different
Good.
industries, and are listening there in a live stream now, the podcast. So how can they encourage a culture where employees feel comfortable sharing their ideas?
Yeah, it's tricky. I'll tell you what, it is one thing I really appreciate. I had a conversation on a podcast years ago with Idea Scale, and we spent a bunch of time talking about the vulnerability of being a problem owner, because you have to say, like, I need help. And that's not an easy thing to do. Engineers normally try to solve problems. Management tries to solve problems. And so, it does take some vulnerability. The things that we've seen be most helpful are probably two facets. One is to get approval the whole way through the management chain. And that means from the top, but it also means middle management, because I've seen versions at different organizations where the leading manager, the top people say, hey, we're going to do this thing. We're going to have this initiative. I want everyone to do it. But then by the time that message gets to the middle management, they're saying, yeah, you better work on this after you finish your other work, which means you're really not going to have time. I'm not funding this, And so you need a concrete message the whole way through so that people know they're doing what they're supposed to. Like, you can affect that with, performance appraisals, messaging, all of those things are important. You need the person to feel like they're being rewarded for the good work and not punished because they're doing something extracurricular. And that's the second thing, is you need to make sure the messaging isn't that it's not extracurricular. Mm-hmm. Something we always talk about is it is part of their daily job. Like I'm sure we'll get into this later as well, but when we run campaigns or challenges, etc., we are not doing things that are in addition to their daily work. Like, it's just a different means to solve their normal work. And so we really stress on having problem ownership. We're stressed on the person. Like, this is the work you're supposed to accomplish. It's just, you didn't go hire somebody else. You didn't spend a bunch of extra time on your own. You got a solution from somewhere else is really all it comes down to. And then to make sure I can remember, the other thing I wanted to say is really about how you sell to your organizations. For many years, my team used to do a very grassroots marketing effort of going to different organizations, sitting in meetings and listening to them talk about their problems and helping them identify, this is a good thing to bring to the crowd. We would help them. But more than that, we built a really strong innovation imperative and then followed it with industry examples. And they're not all NASA examples. There's plenty of industry examples of utilizing internal and or external crowdsourcing if you just search that online, you'll find plenty. People like to brag about their successes. And so we could find a lot of concrete examples. And I guess the last part of that is really making sure you are addressing your audience. And so something we did about 5 or 6 years ago was figure out who is it that we're talking to and how do we want to frame these successes? Because for instance, if I'm talking to a NASA person, I don't want to talk about this excellent solver from somewhere else, because that's it's almost like we took the best part of your job and gave it over here in some ways. But instead we talk about, hey, this problem owner had this problem. They used this tool we have and they got an awesome solution. They saved money, they saved time. And so framing your problem, or framing your success based on the audience that you're going to be presenting to is super important. So all of the cross-industry leaders, et cetera, if you're trying to get your organization to be open to it, then showing them past successes with real data and nice stories from the perspective that they'll understand and appreciate is super important.
Yeah, very interesting. And you mentioned the initiative of participating to multiple meetings within different organization. This is one of the interesting approaches I've heard. But sometimes some brilliant ideas could be in some organizations we didn't think about, like, I don't know, it could be HR, it could be any other departments. And I do remember Steve saying in the podcast that idea guys are not welcome in big companies, because there's a frame, they need you to do a task from A to Z, and this is actually the thing within big companies. So in this case, let's imagine I'm a company and we never did this before, and what is the first advices you're gonna give us to start, Ryan?
Okay, so if you really want to start with like an internal crowdsourcing program, one of the most important things is to have a platform, like having a means to connect the people, a centralized location. And for a really small startup, that could even be, maybe you could build it off of your internal SharePoint, or something maybe you already have as an organization. It depends on what's normal for your org, because it may be hard to invest early in a platform that maybe costs more than you're used to. But really, I think finding an organization that focuses on ideation management and internal innovation will be a huge help, because again, like you mentioned, to use your phrase, you don't want to recreate the wheel. Like there's a bunch of things that are table stakes for internal ideation management, and many people who are new to this would not be privy to what is useful and not. And I think if you get connected with a company or organization who has this already, then you're going to give yourself that better starting point. We've had a few different platforms throughout the years, and it's been a huge benefit to leverage the infrastructure and knowledge of those organizations. And so the other thing is to really focus, like I mentioned earlier, focus on problem ownership. This is not something that most organizations do. Most organizations tend to have more of what I would call like a suggestion box style, where it's just, hey, people with ideas, send me your ideas and we're going to look at them. Or it's somebody from the top. It's or it'll be a CEO or somebody say, I have a lot of money I want to spend on this problem, but no one owns said problem. Like there's no one to do anything with it. And with both of those formats, which are the two I see the most, it's a heck of a lot of work for whoever's in charge of running the innovation program, because you have to do everything. You have to find SMEs, subject matter experts, to evaluate. How do you even know if it's a good idea? You also don't know who can fund it long term, who can work it. Am I going to make somebody mad because now we're changing their job? So you have all of these questions, and it becomes a lot of work for every single idea, even if they're not good. If somebody submits an idea, and let's say hypothetically a janitor says, it would be so much better if I did this instead of this in my daily routine. Like, it might be good, but I don't know. I'm not a janitor. I've never experienced that life. And so there is a format for where that's useful, but it's a very expensive format. And so we've found a lot of success and rely almost wholly on having individual problem owners bring very targeted, specific campaigns, like the one I mentioned before. We didn't come up with it. We didn't decide, we need to measure dynamic gas in a closed environment. The person charged to work that, came to us and said, hey, we need help getting a better solution to this problem. We posed it. And right away, he's already, his team was already the subject matter experts. They're already the evaluators. They're already the implementers with the budget and means to implement if they need to. They're the ones who get connected with the crowd as people come in. That all of the things were baked in. And so I think those are two really important things: to have a platform, and then I think really focusing on problem ownership. That way you can ensure that real work's getting done. Because I promise you, if you're starting something new, you're going to be fighting all of the negative perception of innovation.
Yeah,
a lot of people hear innovation and they're like, oh, I'm just going to get some sticky notes and Sharpies. We're going to put on a board. We're going to have fun. And then nothing's going to happen, right? And so you're going to fight that. And so a lot of times we don't even use the words innovation. A lot of times we just talk about whatever it is that we're doing, because I want people to realize this is not extracurricular. This is accomplishing your work. It's just different than what they're used to.
Yeah, very interesting. And thank you for these advices. And so in this case, let's continue imagining I set up those internal crowdsourcing efforts. How can I measure the success of these efforts?
Sure. So I think it will. Everyone always wants to know about KPIs. Everybody asks about them all the time. And you also hear people say, KPIs don't mean anything. Everyone has an opinion for sure. But the things that we use and have been pretty successful with is we have, and I'll give you our end state because some of it we're still working on, but we have a pre-survey. So when someone comes to us and provides us kind of an intake of information, what are you looking for? What would you call it? Who's in your team? What are your deadlines? Do you have money or not? Those kinds of things. We also, as we're kind of ingesting that and drafting a campaign for them, we also ask them questions like, what would success look like? And then what would full success versus incremental success versus significant advancement? What would those things look like? What are your goals? And by capturing that ahead of time, at the end, we have a closeout survey. So where we ask them a bunch of questions like, was this successful and how successful was it? If you had, and a question we also ask in pre-survey is, if you were to do this traditionally, how much would it cost in time and in maybe procurement dollars? And then at the end, we ask that same follow-up question. Okay, now we know what we spent on this project in time and whatever, if there's a cost. Now that we know what it actually was, let's make an apples to apples comparison. Here's what you said you would have done, and it would have got you X, but this thing actually got you 10X. So how do we make that equivalent? Maybe you multiply it by 10 or whatever. And so we end up with how successful was it based on the opinions of the project owner. We end up with what were the cost savings of doing it this way versus doing it traditional methods. And so it's a fair amount of work, and we have to keep all of this data ourselves. But by asking these very specific questions over a long period of time, we've developed both aggregate and specific data sets that we can provide when we're selling. So going back to the messaging earlier, when we provide these case studies, we're now providing our own. I'm saying, hey, we saved $250K in 6 months on this measured dynamic gas campaign alone. They only spent a few weeks on it. So we might subtract the time they spent, et cetera. So it's not exactly $250K, but somewhere I have it documented. We get the idea. And I have been in conversations with engineers who were doubting me from the beginning. I was presenting to them our capabilities. And from the beginning, I was kind of getting heckled. And by the end, they told me, hey, I'm sorry, like, you clearly have something here. You didn't just tell me nice stories, but you have the data to back it up. And like that meant something to me. And having said data is extremely important. And so we've been able to capture that through soft dollars, not hard dollars. But if you can get hard dollars, even better. Yeah. But I think being very particular with what questions you ask, when you ask them, and keep consistent throughout all of your projects, even though it's hard, that'll allow you to have a really good measure of your savings or whatever it is that you're trying to do.
Yeah, very, very clear. And as I'm working actually and currently on, because strategy and innovation, it's an ocean. I'm working more specifically on generative AI strategy. With all the options we can have in generative AI, text to text, text to image, LLMs, It's a very, very big um, topic, and I would like to know, how do you see this technology shaping the future of internal crowdsourcing?
Yeah, I think it's going to complement what we have. I do think it is going to change what kinds of things we bring to the community, because there will be times where generative AI is going to be good enough, like it's going to provide somebody a good enough solution, at least from their perspective. It may be worse than what they would have gotten. They may not know that. But I think from the point of like what's being brought, like who's coming to us with problems now that we've established ourselves as this place for them to get solutions, I think we'll see a little bit of a change. But in terms of like how the platform works, I think that we have multiple ways that it's going to help advance what we can do and how we bring value. So on the solver side, I'm hopeful that generative AI will help people improve their submissions. So if there's a question and you're providing an answer, ideally generative AI can be, helping you word correctly what you want to say, and maybe even pull in references that you weren't thinking of, and also potentially connecting you to other submissions or other questions, other content that's on the platform already, or maybe even off the platform, depending what you're doing. Then as the problem owners, generative AI could hopefully do some of the work that my team does. There's an art form to coming up with the right call to action, with the right challenge imagery, the challenge name, things that are going to elicit interest in the right people. Because when we send a launch email to our subscribers, our community who follow us, which is about 25,000 NASA civil service and contractors, that's a lot of responsibility to not bug them. I don't want them to unsubscribe. I need the right people to see it and go and maybe submit, the right people to say, oh, that's neat, but I don't care about it, delete, right? And so there's an art form there. And I think generative AI may make some of that art form for us. It wouldn't be surprising. We're seeing a lot of art already come out of it. So maybe in the future, some of the work that my team does can get started at least, or maybe eventually replaced by generative AI. We won't have to go through gatekeepers like
And this is very interesting what you said, being placed. So you mentioned earlier Karim Lakani, right? And I like something he said. He said that AI will not replace human, but human with AI will replace human without AI. So in the future, everyone should embrace AI. Whatever the context is, and crowdsourcing is typical, as you mentioned. It's a typical context where we should actually use it. Especially if I'm coming from a technical background and I knew anything about marketing and I need to fulfill things, generative AI could help me to open eyes, I think. And this is very brilliant. So
if it's okay, can I add one more?
Yeah, please go ahead, Ryan.
I want to add one more thing, which is the thing I'm actually most excited about generative AI for our internal is its ability to route information to the right people. We're not there yet, but in theory, every individual could have a profile that says, I care about this stuff, I work on this or whatever. And the really important thing, and what I think provides most value in this internal innovation, is making the connections with the right people, because you're talking about your own organization. And so we have, however big your organization is, these people don't know to talk. They don't know how to talk. They don't know they should talk. They don't talk the same language, right? And so crowdsourcing breaks those barriers for us. It breaks those silos. But the problem is it's still not great in our current form at notifying everyone. It's just this blanket, everybody, who cares about this, right? And you figure out. We try to word it rightly, and then you decide. But there's a lot of me as you in an art form, and you as the reader saying, maybe I care about this. But generative AI, I think, can bridge that gap. It's going to say, based on this problem and based on what you've said you care about, I'm going to notify you only of the things you care about, or at least give people the opportunity. I'm very excited about the ability to properly route notifications and route information. Somebody submitted something that you might want to look at, even though it's over here, that kind of things. I think there's a lot of benefits there. I've talked to some different. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I'm very excited as well. And thank you for this, because it opened a lot of lot of eyes, including mine, on the fact that we bridge the crowdsourcing internally with generative AI will help also to boost synergies and collaboration internally for people they don't know each other, because generative AI could lead us to someone can help us to take the project to the next level, as well as I can also say, but we're not gonna go into details. Will help also to minimize a bit the not invented here syndrome, because we're gonna work on some things internally rather than just keep thinking outside of the box and waiting for the outside of the box to bring something, while there is a lot of value in the box within the organizations, and this is very interesting. So we're almost in the end of the podcast, and I have one last question. I ask all my guests. So, if you have one piece of advice you would offer to big companies, organizations looking to transform their employees to innovators, what is this one piece of advice you would have?
Okay, so I kind of gave away my first gut, so I'm gonna go with my second. My first one, I'm gonna kind of give you two, which I'm cheating. My first one I've already said is focus on problem ownership. Like, that is huge. Focus on, like, it will save you so much time, and it will put you above what almost everybody's doing in innovation space. My second is more generic, and it's just kind of my personal philosophy, is like, hard work tends to only get done by the people who like are willing to do it, which sounds so like simple, but I feel like, especially in government, all of the time there is so much power in like an org chart and a site curator, and all I have to do, if someone tells me I can't do something and I don't believe them, or if somebody tells me that it's too hard to get done and I think I could do it, then I just do it. And all the time you can cut through red tape, you can cut through bureaucracy, you can get work done just by finding the right people. And so I use whatever resource I have, call people all the time. And it's so cool now that we're connected so easily with all of these things like Google Meet, Teams, etc. I call people all of the time to get work done. And it is surprising how people are so like surprised. Like, they don't know me. I call them video on. I call that the modern firm handshake. I'm just like, hey, how's it going? People get really like surprised. But you can get a heck of a lot of work done by calling people. And I realize it's not within necessarily the theme of this, but a lot of what we get done at COSI is people like me or otherwise just doing stuff that other people said was too hard. And I promise you, a lot less is hard than what you think. Like, you can really just get stuff done by contacting people. And the cool thing is that's what our platform does too. It connects people. And so I find a lot of value in connecting people.
Yes, thank you so much for these rich insights, and I liked what you just said. It's about a platform. It's about the human connection. So bridging the human side with the technology side to boost the internal crowdsourcing and collaboration. So thank you so much for this podcast, Ryan, and looking forward to see you maybe again in another format.
Right. I can't wait. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thanks for the audience.
All right, have a good one. Thank you. Bye.